So, good evening. My name is Rena Milgrom, and I come from the dancers' world, even though the dance actually became, for me, more about movement education and movement therapy, because that's how the path is going and everything is related. But yeah, my interest is now more in movement, in human movement, in therapy, and also like the bridge between art and therapy, because there are two different worlds, but they're very, very closely related. So Laban was my vessel to that world, because he actually, even though he lived 100 years ago, and we want to look at the time where, you know, what was going on in that time, he was actually the first improviser in terms of movement or human body, and also first therapist. Of course, he would never call himself that way, but he was always interested in art and therapy combination. At that time, it didn't exist, of course. But yeah, so in his time, that was an amazing time, as you know, the beginning of 20th century, where technology, industrial revolution, arts and psychology were surfacing in Europe, at least. And so he was reacting to that, of course. The time when photography was invented, it actually completely changed the visual artist's direction, because yes, they didn't need to depict suddenly the realistic world, or so they had to find something new in order to express. So Art Nouveau came to the, was developed, and that was the reaction to that, and yeah, that gave the opportunity to the artist to actually not expressed realistically, but individually. So they had the opportunity to actually, show their perception of the world, each one differently. And so very interesting movement, very interesting time. And so Laban was heavily influenced by Art Nouveau, because that brought also the abstraction concept. Art Nouveau was a abstract art, and also the empathy theory, which was developed in this time. So that was his background, and I'm very glad that I've heard the speech before of Blanca Maderova, who was here talking about phenomenology and neuroscience, because even though Laban came with his theory 100 years ago, it's now very, very much recognized by science and by these various fields of human psychology, neuroscience, and therapy. So let's look at him. He's here in his old age, as we see. He is here in a young age, and he was fascinated by human movement, even though he was originally visual artist, and he deliberately left the visual arts in order to come to the dance world, to the movement art, which was actually very weak discipline at this time. And so he was risking his career maybe, and he determined that he's going to put the art of movement on the same level as other arts. His main goal and desire was actually to gain recognition for something ephemeral as is dance. So because music is notated and visual arts is depicted, he felt that he needs to develop a notation system which can somehow preserve the art of movement and which can be repeated, which can be replicated. So this was a big part of his work. Maybe 14 years he was working on that. But he he came to many problems when he was creating the notation system, and he had to overcome them because nobody before him actually structured the movement into units, into body parts, into different dynamics. So he had to do this beforehand, develop a language first, before he developed the movement, the notation. So we come to that, but I jump a little bit back. So here we see where Laban movement analysis is actually used today. So it's not only dance and theater, which was the original field, but it's a part of the training of dance psychotherapy or somatics, as well as coaching, management, and cross-cultural communications. So yeah, so let's go back to Laban and his interest. He was exploring the notion of polar extremes and the need for integration of the oppositional concepts. He knew that the extremes is like black and white, and he knew that there is a whole scale what's going on between, so not black and white world as we can experience in many cases today. And so this is maybe also one of the reasons why his theories and body of work is not available to the mainstream, really, because it's a world of questions rather than answers. And so he saw the polarities as a continuum or continua, which can help us to understand ourselves and who we are as a human beings, and what actually differs us from animals or from I guess from animals at that time, or from machines. So if we go back to form versus the contained. Yeah, he was, of course, he was interested in forms as well, but he was much more interested what happens in the change between the forms. So in other words, the postures or positions where the body is can be interesting for some reason, but in some ways, but he was much more interested in the change, what happens between these, the postures or the shapes of the body. So it's an energy, and it's an energy which qualifies and modifies the action, and so he calls it effort. Effort is some kind of an inner intention which humans have, or animals, that's same, and the intention is then visible in movement. So it doesn't stay inside, it has to be actually revealed somehow in the movement. And so he believes that it's necessary that our intentions and emotions are actually revealed. And he also believes that every movement, every gesture, and every human action has some kind of a purpose. So he was looking how to actually find harmony, how to find a balance between these two worlds of inner emotions and outer actions. So because he was a great observer, he saw that the humans are living actually in two different worlds, in the outer space, and they express themselves through the movement in the space, but that there is an inner world, which means that we are actually shifting from mood to mood. And so his goal was to actually combine the moods and the space. Yeah, so four main categories were developed, and those we see here. And so body, that's like maybe the first thing what we are interested here, or like in a dance world, the body is the first thing which is explored. What is moving, which body parts, and the mechanics of the body, the structure of the body. So that's that, but so we are asking what is moving, whether it's only a wrist or hand or head, and what kind of body part, and also where the movement is initiating, because that is a big difference if the movement is initiated in the head, or in the chest, or in the pelvis, or in the knees, or in the extremities, or in the center. So those are all things which we are learning to observe and to actually feel the difference between them. It's very connected to our developmental patterns, but we're not going to go into developmental patterns now. Effort, that is the color, how it is moving, because everyone is totally unique in this, and if two people are pick up the cup of coffee and have a sip of coffee, every person does it totally differently, or not totally, but differently, which maybe not everyone can observe, but trained eye can observe. And it's the same with the human walk. It's virtually impossible to imitate somebody's human walk, and you may know that it's being used now with the detective and investigation in the investigation field. It's like a fingerprint. So how the movement is done. So that's the effort, the color of the movement, dynamics, space, where in the space the body is going, and shape. It's about relationship. It's about relationship to myself and to the outer world. So there is always this rhythm of inner-outer, function, expression, and exertion, recuperation, and mobility and stability. So he was also always working with these dualities and these rhythms. So big concept. So let's see here the effort taxonomy. Even in the effort we have different qualities, and those are the four main ones, which is the weight. Something is moving, something has a weight which is moving through the space with a certain time and certain focus, and with a certain tension or freedom, control or not control. So those are the qualities. And let's see here. Yeah, I think you understand what are these. What does that mean? And the problem is that we have about 72 different distinguishable combinations of these, which is always a big discussion when they analyze somebody. What if they, if a team of experts analyze human behavior, let's say politician or a leader or whoever, there has to be a team, of course. That it cannot be just one person analyzing, because when we look at human movement or human activity or behavior, we always put our own prejudices and our own preferences, and also the human eye is not perfect, and a human eye actually works kind of like a snapshot camera, so we actually are choosing or remembering only the most important points what we see in the human movement. It's like a series of snapshots, but we at the same time we know that there is this underlying flow, which is very important. The flow, where is the tension of the muscles or release of the muscles, or control and not control. So that is a big factor. So maybe we can try something. So we wake up and we have some experience. So if you just take your hand and let the arm move totally free without control. So that's a movement where you cannot really stop so easily, because now with some kind of an impulse the arm is flying around and is free. There is a free flow in the arm. If I want to control the arm, then it's kind of a delicate, precise motion where I exactly know every movement is under control, and I can stop it in every moment I want to. So that's the difference between free flow and bound flow. It's the difference between delicate touch or increased pressure, or pressure. So there is this continuum of power or weight or pressure. So that's one of those factors. And so he was able to observe all these configurations of all these qualities, and he actually divided them into states and drives depending how intense the person is. We normally in a everyday life, we continuously oscillate between like two effort factors, and only if we just go into some kind of a rage or a dramatic action, then there is more of these qualities at the same time. So that's something for the training of the movement analyst. Laban himself was really opposed to the world analysis because he knew that all his work is about synthesis, and he knew that he just cannot divide the world of movement and emotions, that all is one. But at the same time, it is also necessary to look at each factor separately, because that's how we learn. So here is something in his notation. So this is how we divide the body into different body parts, and for each body part we have a symbol. And now if we go into space, here maybe what is really interesting, he felt like the space around us is not some dead entity, but he felt like it's a very potent and it's a material which is full of life, and we interact with the space. We interact with the surrounding around us, and we act differently depending on where we are, in what kind of space, and what is around us. So he came up with he was very much inspired by Greek philosophy and Greek thinking and Platonic solids and geometry. So he was actually he put the movement in the space in correlations with the Platonic solids and with a very logical system of up, down, left, right, and forward, backward, which are our axes, and which are actually even corresponding to our inner ear. And it's just these basic dimensions are built in our bodies. And so as we see that that's the first thing. So if we go up and down, he first of all he grew up in a time when modern dance didn't exist, so he actually was trained as a fighter, fencing, and so his movement observation was coming from this discipline first. And he was observing how the fighter or the fencer is moving, and there is a logical way in this kind of form how he defends, how person defends the body. So he was actually then afterwards was able to correlate these directions with he saw every movement as some kind of a dialogue or conversation, and dialogue with gravity. And so all our moves are kind of in a dialogue with the gravity. So if we go up, we have to make some kind of an effort. At the same time, up is combined or connected with the lightness, movement down with the force or with the heaviness. The movement left and right is connected with opening and closing depending on what side of the body is performing or moving. And the movement back and forth is actually connected with our decision making and time. So those are all these factors he actually observed in the world of nature. That's how plants and animals are behaving or moving, let's say. He also knew that the human movement is very, very complex, and that it's observable according to our structure of the joints and proportions, that it is closely related to this last beautiful Platonic shape, icosaedra, which is, as we see, made of 12 equilateral triangles. And that he took as a model for our human potential, for our movement potential, let's say. Laban came up with something he called personal space, which is kind of a space we have around us, and that space he called kinesphere, and it's a sphere where all our limbs are actually can reach, and somehow, because there is millions of different directions or hundreds, let's say, where we can go, this is true, but some of them are effective and some of them are not effective, and he was also interested in the efficacy of the movement. He knew that some directions and some movements are actually made with less energy if they're made in proper way. So he came up with 26 different primal directions in the space, and he divided the kinesphere into 26 directions, which is not so bad. It's not so much. 3 minutes, okay. Yeah, so let's just see. Those are dancers I studied with. We explored the icosaedron because the point for this is not only the movement potential training, the body training, but also as he proposed, that if the body really contacts the space, the emotions are automatically coming along, or it cannot exist one without the other. And then there are rhythms between inner and outer, between the emotions and space, and he put everything he connected these two worlds. And this is just an example of these notations. Those are the 26 or 27 symbols here on the bottom, and this is then how the notation looks like. So at the end, I guess it's important because why we do have still the notation if we have camera is capturing the lot of things, but it doesn't actually capture the inner world of the dancer or the intention. So that's why notation is still alive, of course in a specialized only institutions and mostly recording classical ballet pieces, but something which is much more simplified, you see on the right side, is called the motif notation, which is derived from Laban notation, and this is now used mostly by analysts, by therapists, and whoever wants to actually diagnose or actually read the human behavior, because that's kind of like a shorthanded a notation which depicts only what is really essential, what is important, what sticks out in the human movement. So we see that there is a big difference and much more fun actually to to do the motif than Laban notation, which is capable of notate absolutely everything without emphasizing the essence or importance. So I guess that's the short introduction of Laban.